Boy, howdy. So what you're looking at here on the board is playoffs. I'll go ahead and put a black line in between above and below as currently listed in the standings. And so what we've got here is games played, points, and regulation wins. Regulation wins is your first tiebreaker. And that's where things get kind of interesting. So for Toronto, they're third in the Atlantic. They're not in that much danger, to be completely honest, because Florida hasn't got it together. So what I've done on the board here is I've got their overall records. 79 points, 69 games, 27 regulation wins for Toronto. They're 17-9-7 at home. They're 18-16-2 on the road. So they have more struggles on the road than at home. The good news is if you're a Toronto fan, they've got 8 left at home and 5 on the road. Now, this 5, what that red number is for is this is the number of games that they have against teams that are also on the board. The reason I have them up there is because those very well could be playoff feeling type of games because they're really, really important. So Toronto's remaining schedule, they're at home against Tampa, then they're at home against Nashville. Nashville's on the board. That could be an important game for both teams and is an important game for both teams. At Boston, and then they come back home. They're against New Jersey. I didn't decide to include how many games teams have against already secured playoff teams or teams that aren't going to make the playoffs because New Jersey's playing well, LA's playing well, Anaheim's giving everything a run right now. They're not a pushover. San Jose hasn't been a pushover. So a lot of these teams that are at the bottom, Detroit's won back-to-back. A lot of these teams at the bottom, the pressure's off. So, for these teams, I don't look at them on the schedule and say, oh, well, this makes it easier. They're at home against the Islanders after New Jersey. The Islanders are on the board. Then they're at home against Columbus. Columbus is on the board. So look forward to some nail-biting moments if you're a Toronto fan those nights. Then they're at home against Florida. That's their last matchup against Florida. Could very well secure whether they're third or life gets a little more difficult for them. Then they're at Tampa. They're at Carolina. Again, a team that's on the board right here. They're at Ottawa, at Washington, at home against Detroit, and at home against Montreal. So you look at that schedule and you go, okay, they finish up against Detroit and Montreal. Should Toronto make the playoffs? Absolutely. So to me, of the 6 teams on the board, I like Toronto's chances. They've got 8 at home. They've got 5 on the road. Shouldn't be a problem. But I didn't pre-arrange this. I don't have a book. I didn't figure this all out. I just put all the numbers on and hit record. So we'll go through the rest here. So Columbus, 70 games played, 81 points. Suddenly, right? 25 regulation wins. They're 20-12-4 at home. They're 13-10-11 on the road. Their road record a bit of a challenge, but Nazem Likens is back. Salo's healthy. And the feeling is maybe the worst of it is over for Columbus. Now, they are the number 1 wild card. Their upcoming schedule, they're at home against Pittsburgh. Then they're at home against Nashville, another team on the board. They're at Boston. So Boston's going to play a role in all this too. Boston's not on the board because they're number 1 in the league. But again, does this mean that Boston might take it a bit easy over their last 12, 13 games? Do teams tee off and get points against Boston because Boston's already home and cooled? Tampa Bay, much the same thing. Tampa Bay may very well relax a bit down the stretch. So then they're at home against Washington. They're at Toronto, at New Jersey. So Toronto, again, team on the board. They're at the New York Rangers, team on the board. At Tampa Bay, at Dallas. So that's a long road trip right there. So you go through Toronto, New Jersey, Rangers, Tampa, and then Dallas. That's going to tell us whether or not Columbus is a playoff team. Then they finish up. They have 2 home games, the Islanders and Tampa Bay again. Islanders on the board. And then they play at Carolina to finish the season. The last game that they have at Carolina may very well be deciding fates because, again, these teams are really close together. So the 5 at home and 7 on the road, that 5-game road trip, makes me a little nervous for Columbus. It does get kind of difficult. They are 2 points clear of teams behind them, but those teams have played less games. So I still think it's going to be a challenge for Columbus to make the playoffs. I kind of see them ending up being on the outside looking in. That road trip is absolutely huge. Toronto, New Jersey, Rangers, Tampa, and Dallas. The only team that's outside of the playoff picture completely in that bunch is New Jersey, and New Jersey's playing really well right now. So this could be a really, really tough time for them. But again, does Tampa Bay become a bit easier because they're kind of home and cold in the playoffs? And they may look at last year and say, you know what, we killed ourselves right until the playoffs, and then we died in the playoffs, so let's just take it easy. Carolina, 67 games played, 79 points. They have 26 regulation wins. Again, that's your tiebreaker. They're 19-12-2 at home and 18-13-3 on the road. So their road record and home record very similar to one another. No advantage, I think, between playing them at home or on the road. Their schedule, they're at Detroit and at New Jersey. So again, loose, out of the playoff teams. Don't take them lightly. You should be able to beat them if you're Carolina, especially with Mrazek coming back tomorrow against his former team in Detroit. But we'll see. Then they're at home against Pittsburgh. They go back out on the road to play Buffalo, and then they're at home against Buffalo. The back-to-back against Buffalo, after playing at Detroit and at New Jersey, honestly, with 4 of their next 5 games against those teams, Carolina should be able to get pretty home and cooled over the next week and a half. If they don't, they're going to be doing a lot of looking in the mirror and trying to figure out what they do from here, because it gets tougher. They played home against St. Louis. Then they're at home against Ottawa. Again, outside the playoffs, loose team. Then they're at the New York Islanders. The Islanders, of course, below the playoff line. At Pittsburgh. At home against Toronto. Key game right there. At home against Pittsburgh. So this is where the fact they play Pittsburgh 3 more times becomes important. And people are going to say, why isn't Pittsburgh on the board? Because I didn't have room. I went with no. I'm going to have 6 from each conference. I don't think Pittsburgh misses the playoffs, really, in all honesty. At New Jersey, at home against Boston, at home against Columbus, on the board, and then they're in Boston. So, they have to play Boston twice in their last 3 games. I don't think that's a disadvantage for Carolina because, again, at that point, Boston probably is going to be resting regulars, probably home and cooled with the President's Trophy. Not that they're going to care. They realize that their game's going to be measured in the playoffs. So I would look for, in those last 2 games, Bergeron's probably going to get rested, at least one of them. Marchand's probably going to get rested. If Krug is back, he's going to be rested. There's going to be some controversy out of that. I don't like it either. So when fans say it sucks, I don't like it either. I don't like it on either side. I don't like it for a competitive balance where if you're Toronto and you need Carolina to lose that game, and Carolina's playing a Boston team with 6 of their regulars out because they're resting them, then they're probably going to beat Boston, and then it may knock Toronto out of the playoffs. But at the same time, teams that rest guys, look at last year. A lot of teams that rested guys down the stretch and just took it easy, they get into the playoffs, and oh boy, it's not so easy. So I think there's a two-edged sword there. I think for the team that's resting players, you're playing with fire doing that. So now for Carolina, they have 15 games left, which favors them. They have 8 at home, 7 on the road. Nice balanced schedule. They have 3 games against teams that are on the board. So they have limited ability to affect the outcome of the season for the teams that are on the board. Just the game against the Islanders, Toronto, and Columbus. Outside of that, they're against teams that are either safely in or completely out of the playoff picture. So yeah, for Carolina, I like their chances. They've got the Detroit, New Jersey, back-to-back Buffaloes. They've got 3 against Pittsburgh. They showed they can beat Pittsburgh yesterday. You've got to think they'll win at least 1 out of 3. So I'm already looking at that as they should have 4 wins out of that alone. That takes you up to 87 points. And then you have 11 more games where if they go 500 in that, you have 98 points, and that should make the playoffs. So, Islanders, just below the line. They're coming into Vancouver tomorrow night. 79 points in 67 games. They have 24 regulation wins. This is why they're behind Carolina. That's your first tiebreaker. They're 29-6 at home. They're 15-14-3 on the road. And there's Islander fans going, wait, we're below the playoff line? Yep. They have 6 at home and 9 on the road. This is problematic because their road record's been problematic. They're at Vancouver, who are on the board. They're at Calgary, who are on the board. Barely, but Calgary's on the board. They're not that far clear. Then they're in Edmonton, so this is a tough Western swing. Then they get to go home and play Pittsburgh. They get Calgary again. Then they're at Toronto. So that's four games right there against teams that are on the board. Then they're at New Jersey. I've already talked about New Jersey. They're at home against Carolina. They're at Philadelphia. At home against Buffalo. So again, Buffalo could play a role in making sure certain teams don't make the playoffs. They have that ability right now. They're not going to make the playoffs themselves. They can play spoiler. They're at Montreal, at Columbus. So those are big games right there. And then they're home for 3. So if they struggle with 9 out of 12 on the road, The good news is they're at home for 3. But if they have a poor record in those 9 on the road, it may not matter. They're at home against Minnesota, Chicago, and New Jersey. They do finish the season against Chicago and New Jersey. For the Islanders, I don't know. I'm already leaning towards Toronto staying in their 3rd spot and not moving, which means you just got the 2 wildcard spots left. I like Carolina's schedule remaining, so that leaves 1 spot left. I'm not sure. Because right below the Islanders, you have the Rangers. 68 games played, 76 points, 30 regulation wins. They have the tiebreaker on everybody right now. 18-16-2 at home, 18-12-2 on the road. They're better on the road than at home, and a majority of their remaining schedules on the road. They have 9 on the road, 5 at home. So it's kind of the opposite situation to the Islanders, where on the road they're more below 500 than they are at home, obviously, where they've got 20 wins at home. For the Rangers, they like playing on the road. And they're going to love this schedule because they're in Dallas, Colorado, in Arizona. That's a team that's on the board. Now, the Islanders have 7 games against teams on the board. Rangers have 4. So playoff intensity, rough games, you could see injuries in. The Islanders will likely be in more of those. I'm saying likely because we don't know, but I'm just using what I've got on the board here. They're at home against Calgary after that. They're at home against Pittsburgh. Then they're in Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh will play a large role in what happens with the Rangers as well as with the Carolina Hurricanes. Then they're in Buffalo. So Buffalo again, spoiler. Then they're at home against Columbus. Then they're at Washington, Tampa, Florida. Those 3 games will go a long way to deciding their fate, I would think, because that's right near the end. Then they're at home against Philly. They go to Pittsburgh again. And then they're at home against Chicago. If the Rangers can beat Pittsburgh, they could very well find themselves in the playoffs. They've only got 4 games against teams that are on the board. It's a tough schedule, the way the Rangers have been playing. And with Shesterkin already being confirmed for their next game, we'll see. It's a rough schedule. And since I'm already leaning towards Carolina, as I've said, I think Toronto gets in. That makes it a little bit more difficult. Florida, 68 games, 76 points, 29 regulation wins. They're 17-4-4 at home, 17-12-4 on the road. 6 games left at home, 8 games left on the road. They've only got 3 games against teams that are on the board. It's a little more muddled with Florida, and things have been, well, man, it depends, right? You like Drieger, right? Well, there you go. They're at St. Louis, they're at Dallas. Those 2 games are big. You're against 2 teams. One that's fighting to get that first place in the division, and then you're against a team that's been struggling to score. And Dallas definitely, to me, is a team that I kind of wanted to put on the board, but again, I went with 6 in each conference. So Dallas might be defeatable, put it that way. Then they're at home against New Jersey. Again, the Devils playing spoiler. They go to Detroit. So those are back-to-back games there they're supposed to win. Then they're in Winnipeg. That'll be tough. Team on the board. Versus Buffalo. Again, Sabres, playing spoilers. Then they're versus St. Louis. I know, Buffalo fans are going to be thinking, okay, wait, A, why am I watching this video? And B, why does he keep calling us spoilers? We've lost 6 in a row. So they're at home against St. Louis. Then they go to Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, Boston. 4 games, 4 divisional opponents. The game in Toronto is going to be an important one. And if they're going to make it into the playoffs, I would say they need to win 3 out of 4 on that road trip. Whether it's Toronto, Ottawa, Boston, Toronto, Montreal, Boston, Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, one of them has to be Toronto as well, I would think. Then they're at home against the Rangers, Ottawa, and Washington. So they do finish out the season with 3 in a row at home, which, considering their home struggles, oddly problematic. But we'll see. So if I had to wager a guess right now, I would say Toronto, playoffs. Carolina, I kind of like their chances. And because the Rangers are pretty darn good on the road, they're playing 4 games against teams that are on the board. And then they have the 3 games against Pittsburgh. This game may not be that important to Pittsburgh. The Islanders do tend to struggle a bit on the road. They've got the 4-game road trip here. I kind of like the Rangers' chances. So considering what we've got left, I like Toronto finishing 3rd in the Atlantic and Carolina and the Rangers for the wild cards, just based on what we have left. Calgary, 70 games played, so we're going west. 3rd in the Pacific, 79 points. 16-13-4 at home. Their home record's a problem. They are on the road 20-14-3. very good on the road. The problem is they've got 8 out of 12 remaining at home. So they need to figure out how to win at home, which is, if you haven't figured out by this point of the year, I don't know what to tell you. They're at home for the next 2. They're against the Islanders and Winnipeg, so 2 of the teams that are on the board. Then they're at New York, the Rangers, at New York, the Islanders, and then they're at New Jersey. So their next 4 games are against teams on the board. Playoff intensity will abound in Calgary games. Then they're at home against Tampa, San Jose, and Anaheim. Anaheim has been pretty easy for them this year. Then they're at Vancouver. That's their last road game of the year. So they play 5 of their last 6 at home. They have to figure this out, their home record. They're at home against Winnipeg, Vegas, and Edmonton to finish the year. So they may very well play a role in deciding who finishes first in the division with the last 2 home games against Vegas and Edmonton. They may be able to make the Battle of Alberta happen by losing to Vegas and winning against Edmonton. It's possible. So I do like their chances because they are ahead of everybody else. I don't think that the teams that are behind them are going to catch them for third. So they should be able to get in the 8 games at home. They need to fix their home record. But overall, they should get in. Minnesota, 77 points in 69 games. They have 30 regulation wins. Calgary with the 25. So if we factor that in, it doesn't really matter because Minnesota's not in their division. 19-11-5 at home for Minnesota. They're 16-16-2 on the road. They have fixed their road problems. So, they're at home against Vegas. Then they go to Philadelphia. That's not going to be easy. Those are back-to-back really tough games. If they win one out of those 2, they're going to feel much better about their chances. Then they're at home against Nashville. That's a key game against a divisional rival. Versus Chicago at Chicago. So the rivalry between Minnesota and Chicago will be pretty heavy. Chicago's not on the board. I don't see them being able to get in, but Chicago will be a tough out. At Winnipeg after those back-to-back. Then they're at home against Colorado, New Jersey, Buffalo. So again, with New Jersey and Buffalo in Minnesota, those are games they have to win. You've got to win those games. They're at home. You're in a playoff stretch. You've got to win those. Then they're at St. Louis, the New York Islanders, who are on the board, at Washington and at Nashville. That is a brutal 4-game road trip to end the season. That is a really brutal 4-game road trip to end the season. Have I mentioned it's a brutal 4-game road trip to end the season? Because it is. So while I like Minnesota's chances, they have to make hay before that 4-game road trip to end the season. I have mentioned they have a 4-game road trip at the end of the season, right? Yeah, that's a rough one. That's quite the road trip. So for Minnesota, guarded optimism with Minnesota that with that road trip and considering they've been better on the road over the last month and a half, they still have a chance. Vancouver, above the playoff line, 76 points in 68 games. They've got 27 wins in regulation. The same total as Nashville, who are just lurking about. Vancouver, 21-9-4 at home. They've struggled a bit at home recently. I'll see them tomorrow night against the Islanders. We'll see if they can get off the snide and give themselves some points and some room here. They're 14-18-2 on the road. Their road record is a problem. I'm just looking here to see if, they're the only team currently on the board with more regulation losses on the road than they have wins on the road. That is a problem. Their home record's good, but their road record is a problem. They have 7 at home and 7 on the road. So for them to make it, they're going to have to win at least, I would say, 4 of those road games. They're at home against the Islanders, who are on the board. Then they're in Arizona, also on the board. They're in Colorado. This is not an easy next 3 games for Vancouver. Then they're at home against Winnipeg. Winnipeg has been struggling on the road recently, so that favors Vancouver. They're at home against Tampa. Then they're in Anaheim, LA, and Vegas. So the Valley of Death that was California, that has no longer been the case this season. But LA's playing pretty darn well, and California teams won't take it easy on Vancouver. Vegas is a tough matchup for Vancouver in Vegas. Then they're at home against San Jose and Calgary. Calgary on the board. They're at home against Anaheim, so they have 2 left against Anaheim. They're in Dallas, they're in Arizona, and then they're at home against Vegas. They've got 5 games against teams on the board. 7 at home, 7 on the road. It's going to be tough. They can make it. If Brock Besser comes back, that would definitely help their scoring. I know people complain about he's not scoring enough, but he's still scoring more than Louis Eriksson. So it would be nice to see him in the lineup and see a really solid top 6 for Vancouver. Oh, we'll see. So Of the six on the board, I'm not feeling great about Vancouver, not because I don't have faith in Vancouver, but because the teams that are below the playoff line. Let's start with Nashville. Nashville, 68 games, 76 points, 27 regulation wins, same as Vancouver. They've got 6 games at home, 8 on the road. They are better on the road than they are at home. So that's actually kind of favorable for them. They're at Montreal, they're at Toronto, they're at Columbus, they're at Minnesota. So 4 games in a row on the road, and 3 of them are against teams on the board. So look for some playoff intensity. Really fun matchups here. Then they're at home against Colorado and Philadelphia before they go back out on the road to Chicago. Come back for one against Winnipeg. Or no, 2. Winnipeg and then Los Angeles. Then they go to Arizona, Colorado. And then they alternate. They're at home against Montreal, at Philadelphia, and at home against Minnesota. If you don't like schedules where it's 1 at home, 1 away, 1 at home, 1 away, this schedule's bothersome. That being said, they have 6 games against teams on the board. Of those, they've got 2 against Minnesota. So how they play against Minnesota is going to go a long way to determining how these teams play. These end up being 3-point games, both of them. That doesn't help Vancouver either, or any of the other teams below them. The 8 games on the road, the 6 games against teams that are on the board. You've got Chicago. You know, I kind of still like Nashville's chances. I still think they're trending in the right direction. And I do like their overall chances. Right beneath them, 69 games played, 76 points as well, 28 regulation wins. So if it comes down to points, everybody's even, then Winnipeg has an advantage right now over Nashville and Vancouver. So that's an issue. And they have 8 games against teams on the board. So they're really going to be in control when it comes to determining whether or not they do or don't make the playoffs. 19, 14, and 3 at home, 16, 14, and 3 on the road. Winnipeg was great on the road, bad at home. Now they've kind of reversed that. They've got 5 remaining games at home. They've got 8 on the road. They need to figure out their road game pretty darn quick. They finish off their homestand with a game against Arizona. Again, a team on the board. They can really do some serious damage. They win this, they go to 78 points in 70 games. Now, and if Arizona loses in regulation, that'll be 70 games played, 74 points. And it gets really difficult to just catch some of these teams already because you've played more games than almost everybody else, other than Winnipeg, who right now are ahead of them. So that game tonight goes a long way to muddling the picture or clearing it up. At Edmonton, at Calgary, at Vancouver, that should be a tremendous road trip. A lot of fun to watch. Calgary and Vancouver, of course, both on the board. Winnipeg fighting to knock one or the other out of the playoffs. Then they're at home against Florida, also on the board. At home against Minnesota, all right, on the board. Then they're in Dallas, Nashville, and then they come home. They play Colorado and Vegas, and then they go out on the road to finish the season with a 3-game road trip that won't be easy. At Calgary, at Colorado, and at Arizona. So they end the season in Arizona. That's also Arizona's last game of the season. Pretty solid right there. But with 8 games against teams that are on the board, if they can win, say, 6 out of those 8, their chances of making the playoffs go up. And I do kind of like their chances, but again, they have to turn around their road record, which has been not great lately. So, Arizona, 69 games, 74 points, 27 regulation wins right now. So they are tied with Vancouver and Nashville for regulation wins and 2 points behind them with 1 more game played. Yeah, you can't get a piece of paper in between these teams right now. 17, 12, and 4 at home, 16, 16, and 4 on the road. So they're NHL 500 on the road. They've got 8 games left at home, 5 on the road. That favors them because Arizona is better at home than on the road. Now, they're at Winnipeg tonight, as I said. Then they're at home against Vancouver. They've already shown they can beat Vancouver. They're at home against the Rangers. That should be a really solid game as well. The Rangers with this exciting, really high-paced. I don't know if it's high-pitched. I don't know the guys that well. High-paced game, and Arizona likes to play the defense first, goaltending, dominant, 1-0, 2-1, maybe 25 shots each. That's kind of a perfect Arizona game. So that clash in styles should make for a good game. Then they're at home against Dallas and Vegas and Detroit. They have to win, I would say, 2 out of those 3. If they lose against Dallas and Vegas, which is possible, things get more difficult. They end up in LA and Vegas after that, so they play Vegas twice. Then they're at home against Nashville. Then they go back out on the road to play San Jose and Colorado before finishing the season with home dates against Vancouver and Winnipeg. It's possible this picture doesn't clear up at all over the next 2 weeks, and those games against Vancouver and Winnipeg decide the fates of all three teams. So, in the East, as much as I'd like to see Columbus make it, I'm wearing a Columbus jersey because I'd like to see Columbus get in. I want to be wrong about this. In the West, I don't see Calgary falling out. I know they've had their struggles at home. I watched the game between them in Vegas last night. The other two are tougher to call. I still like Nashville. I still think Nashville's got a good chance. Of the other remaining three, and keep in mind, these guys are so close. 5 at home, 8 on the road. They struggle on the road. Minnesota's been really hot lately. You know what? I'm going to say Minnesota, but God, it's tough. Because Winnipeg's played well. Vancouver can turn it around. They get Brock Besser back. They could go on a run, especially if they can get Markstrom in somewhere along the way, too. We still don't know how long Markstrom's going to be out. And I don't like writing off Arizona. The West, I think, is kind of tougher to call who makes it and who doesn't than it is the East, which is why that check mark is so sad beside Minnesota, because, yeah, it is tough. It's a tough call. So there you go. That one's not a much better check mark either. So, all right, all that being said, all of this analysis aside, who are the 3 teams that you think make the playoffs out of these 6? Keep in mind there's 2 of them that are divisional, so either Toronto or Florida have to be in here. Over here, for Calgary to be out, Vancouver or Arizona would have to catch them. Arizona's 5 points back, Vancouver's 3 points back and trending in the wrong direction. So, for that reason, I think Calgary's got a good shot. But let me know which 3 end up above and which end up below. We can talk about it after the season's done. So, give me your picks. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for watching. I think one other thing I want to point out, all of the teams you see on this board we can point out flaws with. All of these teams on the board we can point out strengths with as well. This is one tough bunch, and I'm not sure that we see a Stanley Cup finalist out of these teams. I have no idea. No clue, because it is really close. So, thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.